Thank you very much indeed. That's Lena Sinjab in Beirut for us, just coming up to 13 minutes past 11. Labour's former Deputy Leader Tom Watson created waves last year aplenty, not just for the unexpected way in which he quit his role just before the election. Over the last couple of years or more, he's drawn a lot of attention for his dramatic weight loss, which has now led him to start training as a gym instructor, and talked about how much losing weight basically made him a better person, as I always understand it. I've been speaking to him about Labour's performance in the general election, what he makes of the candidates, where Labour needs to go, also about his new book, Downsizing: How I Lost 8 Stone, Reversed My Diabetes and Regained My Health. I asked him what got him focused on losing weight in the first place.
Well, when I plucked up enough courage and bought scales, I was just over 22 stone. Okay. But I suspect I was heavier than that when I was in the years of denial. I was lampooned and parodied by a lot of cartoonists and satirists. My nickname was Tommy Two Dinners. And they it contributed to this idea that I was some kind of thuggish style politician. And I'm not saying that politics isn't tough and brutal, but, I wasn't more thuggish than every other politician that was a lot thinner than me.
And what was the moment you decided something had to change?
There was a voice that grew. I mean, I was diagnosed with type 2 diabetes, but even then I was in denial. And then I was beginning to hit 50. I turned 50. I was reading biographies of great Labour politicians that died in their 50s, and this voice grew louder and louder. It just said, I don't want to die. I don't want to die. And I'd got 2 young kids, and I realised I just needed to change, and that's what happened.
As far as I understand it, you did what we always used to know as Atkins then, just cut out sugar and just sort of eat fat. That's how it started.
Well, Atkins was slightly different. Atkins was sort of eat as much protein as you want. And actually the research that came out after the Atkins diet showed that if you eat too much protein, eventually your body turns that into sugar. I won't bore everyone to death with it, but they call it gluconeogenesis. What I did was read Dr. Mosley's books and Dr. Aseem Malhotra's work, and then consciously choose to defy the government's guidelines on the balance of fat, protein, and fat, protein, and carbohydrates. And I significantly reduced my carbs and I increased my fat intake. And the day I did that, I started to lose weight, get better sleep, get improved cognition, and just feel better and better every day.
Sean Simon was a kind of a new Labour politician. I think he represented Erdington, I think.
He did, yeah.
And he had been extremely overweight. And then kind of your pattern really lost it abruptly. I remember reading a great piece by him saying, look, it's great people are pleased for me, but what they say to me implies that I am somehow a better person for weighing less, that I'm morally superior to what I was. And he felt that was wrong. Are you getting any of that?
Yeah, I get a lot of... well, the most irritating thing I get is people say, don't lose any more, you're fine as it is. And I just think to myself, I've just lost 8 stone in 2.5 years. I think I'll be the one who decides how much weight I want to lose. But I slightly disagree with Sean on that, because actually on the health journey I've been on, I would say that my fight or flight responses were triggered at least a dozen times a day in the high pressure job I did when I was overweight. And when the weight came off, that stopped happening. I stopped getting triggered in meetings, in conferences and TV interviews, radio interviews. And I just felt this sort of sense of calm come over me. And that can only be done through nutritional change and better exercise. So it does change you when you lose weight, or it can change you. And I just feel more chilled out. And I think when you're in your 50s, that's a great place to be. And you know, what is it when you're triggered? What that really is your body generating cortisol and shooting it around your veins and hardening your arteries. It's actually good for your longevity if you can remain calm under pressure. And I mean, the one thing I did realise, and it was a kind of an epiphany moment, this, I realised at the age of 51 that though I was moderately successful in my chosen profession, everything I'd done until then was a reaction. I'd reacted against growing up in the Midlands in the 80s, where there were no job prospects for young kids. And, you know, it was quite parochial in Kidderminster where I grew up. I got to London and I was sneered at by metropolitan liberals who were, you know, more educated than me. And I reacted against them. I was utterly driven in everything I did to prove myself against them.
Including that you could eat more than anybody else.
Eat more, drink more, work harder, be better at politics, win more elections. Everything I wanted to do was trying to prove myself against these weird metrics that people set themselves. And at 51, I realised I didn't need to do that anymore. I wanted to, you know, and so I actually resolved. I thought, right, I want to live another 51 years, and every day I want to lead a positive and purposeful life.
You know, I'm trying to get to the bottom, obviously, in terms of politics, if there's anything that would drag you back. So I just, you know, if somebody of your liking, it might be a Jess Phillips, it might be someone like Andy Burnham coming back. I mean, it might, for all I know, be David Miliband sort of coming back. So is there anything that could you know, engage you and enthuse you in coming back into it?
Well, you should never say never in politics, Adrian. But for me, you know, I've left the front line, and I've done it purposefully and decisively. And the day-to-day frontline politics doesn't appeal to me. I mean, the one thing I now realise, I didn't quite know it when I resigned a couple of months back. You can resign as a deputy leader, but you can never resign as an ex-deputy leader. And so people are still asking me for assistance and advice. And, you know, maybe at some point in the future I'll try and help out where I can. But right now I'm really focused on writing and training to be a level 2 gym instructor, which is a lot harder than it looks.
You mean there's more to it than just standing next to an exercise bike? Go on, one more minute. It's only pain.
You've got to learn about anatomy and physiology, and there's a lot of Latin words that I've not read for a long time.
There were 3 things I heard said about you in various times in your career. The first one you probably won't like, and I remember exactly where it was. I was with Charlie Whelan, who, for those who don't know, was Gordon Brown's sort of much feared, sort of kind of hated but rated, possibly spin doctor. And I was with him in 2000, and I happen to remember it was in Charleroi before England played. We'd been interviewing him for some reason. And I said, Tom Watson's... I spoke to Tom Watson the other day, he's a West Brom fan. Oh, is he? He said he'll be telling you he's a socialist next. Right, which was... So I just want to ask you, are you a West Brom fan? And more importantly, are you actually a socialist? Because there are those, the Momentum wing of the Labour Party, who would doubt even that.
I'm actually a Kidderminster Harriers fan, adopted by West Bromwich Albion, usually when they needed visas, when they were in lower leagues. And I've always said that. But I am a socialist.
And how do you define socialism? That's not the Momentum form of socialism, which is kind of got a purity where, you know, it's getting elected and being the government is almost secondary to the purity of the project.
Yeah, I'm definitely not that. I mean, look, I come from a sort of tradition that would draw down on ethical or Christian socialism, which is values-led. It's about sharing power and opportunity. It certainly wants an electoral route, which to achieving greater opportunity for people, which means that you inherently believe in compromise and collaboration. You know, you could say that that's part of the social democratic tradition in the Labour Party, which is sort of in a minority position right now. I'm certainly not a command economy socialist. I don't think that we should be renationalising all the assets of the nation, which is probably lends itself to a lot of Momentum activists. And I think that's the distinction you're trying to draw. And in 2000, that's probably where Charlie Whelan was, although he then enjoyed a very good career working for Gordon Brown, who is one of the great social democrats in my view.
And when did you realise this wasn't going to work? You couldn't get this Labour Party to function as you would want it to function in that kind of socialism?
Well, for me...
what was the moment? There must be a moment.
There's never a moment, but there are sort of contributory factors. I mean, I guess the 2 issues I spoke out on in the last few years were anti-Semitism, which is a unique set of circumstances to the Labour Party, but one that brought great shame and troubled me greatly. And the other one was on Europe. I mean, I am a very strong pro-European social democrat. And that's where I made public interventions. And if I'm being honest, that probably meant that I'd expended a lot of political capital with Labour Party members that would have made it very difficult for me to achieve the changes I wanted to see after an election were Labour to lose it. And obviously I thought we weren't in good shape because we were way behind in the polls. So if there were political decisions that I had to make why I left, it's probably those two. And, you know, that's the very great challenge for the next set of leaders. I mean, the first thing they've got to do, I think, is explain to the country and to 500,000 Labour Party members why Labour keeps losing elections. In the last 11 elections, we've only won 3 of them, and we've not won an election in over a decade. That's the pressing concern, and I think that leadership candidates have to be very honest about that. And then secondly, they need to give the members an election-winning strategy, and then the members have got to decide whether they actually want to win or not. So there's some big challenges ahead for the Labour Party.
And make the compromises possibly necessary to win.
Yeah, I mean, in a two-party system like ours, there is always compromise required. There's always pragmatism required, and partnership and collaboration. You know, we are a big tent party, or we used to be, and if people cannot resolve their differences internally, then they're not going to convince voters to put them into government.
I mean, the other thing I heard said about you was by a new Labour type who, when you got elected deputy leader, and all the, you know, that came at the same time as all the Corbyn stuff was happening, he said, "Oh, just keep your eye on Tom Watson. He's the Francis Underwood of all this. He's an operator. He'll be the last man standing."
Well,
I mean, if that was the plan, you know, it manifestly didn't work. Well, it didn't work out well for Francis Underwood in an utterly different sense, obviously. But when did you realise that wasn't going to work? What did you think? Hang on, this lot can't hack it. I'll come through.
Well, I think what they're saying is, you know, I was cunning and resilient. And clearly, given that I'm talking to you about my new book, Downsizing, and I'm now an ex-politician, neither of those were true, Adrian. I suppose it's a bit like being a BBC journalist these days. If you're getting attacked from left and right, you're probably in the right position. And at the time, the Blair people, you know, I obviously resigned under Tony Blair, and it sort of nearly brought the government down at the time. And it was a very chaotic resignation. So there was a lot of there was a lack of forgiveness in the system for that at the time. I think now that's quite a while ago now, and there's a greater resolution with those people that managed to put together an election-winning formula in the mid-90s. And actually the person, I don't know who it was you were talking to, if they were close to Tony Blair. I've actually had quite a rapprochement with Tony Blair in recent years and enjoy his friendship.
Would you have stayed any longer then if you thought they might have won this election? Because the uncharitable interpretation is kind of along the lines of rat deserting sinking ship. You could see the way it was going. You thought, I don't want to be associated with this. Lest I do want to come back into it.
Well, there's a balance you have to make, because there's a very great sense of obligation and duty in all of this. Duty to the country, duty to your party, the members that put you there. But you've also got, you know, love of your family, and, you know, you've got to sort of look after yourself physically, in my sense. And in the end, I weighed it all up and thought, there's some very talented people on the Labour benches that they could shoulder the load going forward. It might be a bit of a shock to the system if I go now, but it's the right thing for me, the right thing for my family. And I took a leap. And, you know, people are going to criticise me for that, but I'm not too worried about that. I think it was the right thing to do.
So, do you bear any responsibility, do you think, for this horrendous election defeat?
Well, I've got to hold my hands up. You know, I was part of the collective, people collectively responsible for it, although I think people would give me a little bit of leeway on that. If I was writing the manifesto, it would have probably been a little bit different to the one that ended up being printed. Although I didn't vote, I wasn't involved in deciding this current manifesto. And I think there were sort of organisational things we could have done better in terms of where we moved our resources and our people in the election. But those are minor, so those people that want to blame me, I'm sure, will continue to blame me. I hope that most Labour Party members will remember me as someone who just did their best and tried to give an honest account of himself.
But across Europe, it's a similar picture, which might lead you to console yourself, saying, "Well, this is just the way it's going." It's there's a drift away from the Labour left. But do you see any hope? Do you any hope of the forces coming back to the middle?
Well, you have to live for hope. I do think that. And I've always believed this, that politics is won in the centre ground. We are in a unique set of circumstances now. And I think Labour needs to that's essentially what its decision has got to be. Where does it want to sit politically? Does it want to be an electoral force? And if so, is it prepared to compromise and tack into the centre a little bit more? One of the sort of peculiarities of this election was I do think the Tories were there for the taking in this one. They were a fairly weak and disorganised administration, and I think that unlike 2 years ago, the country was ready for change. We're a political party to put forward a cogent prospectus that people could believe in, and that's why the soul searching, I think, has got to be very deep in the party. And I wish everyone well when they go through that post-mortem. And, you could reflect on that and feel great sadness that an opportunity was missed, or you can just be positive about it and try and put it right for the next election.
Keir Starmer seems to be the front runner. I know you've been too long in this game to start nailing your flag to anyone's mast, if that's the right expression. But it's trying to see what he's going to have to do is be two Keir Starmers. He's got to be a very lefty Keir Starmer to get elected by the party. And then he's got to go quite sharply to the right, towards the middle, if he ever wants a hope of getting elected.
I'd advise all candidates not to try and ride two horses. What I think they've all got to do is give a very clear account of themselves. And actually, it's harder for the candidates that were in the shadow cabinet, because they are the ones that signed up to the manifesto that was essentially kicked out in 2 elections. So first of all, they've got to explain their role in the manifesto, what they felt was right and what they felt was wrong about it. The members deserve that. And then they've got to talk about how they think Labour can win again. And if you try and triangulate and do all those silly little day-to-day games where you say one thing to one member and one to a voter, you're never going to win and you're never going to be Prime Minister. So I think they should find courage and be honest about what they really think and stand up for the country. And if the members choose to reject that, then that's the next challenge for the Labour Party. But and I think the candidates will do that. They're biding their time, but I think in the next few weeks they're all going to set out their stall, and I look forward to seeing it.
That's Tom Watson, and his book is called Downsizing. I asked you for membership of the Child's High Club for your stories